Thank you everyone for clicking into this video. This video is going to be talking about a project for subject SCQS 2013 Probability and Statistics. The topic for our project is Instagram use and mental health. We are from Group 10 and team members are Chong Kar Min 287173, Tracy Liaw 287944, Low Wei Jie 289669, and Foong Weng Yau 289851. In this video, we're going to be talking about a few parts including the introduction, the objective, data analysis, and discussion.
My name is Tracy Liaw and I'm going to start off with the introduction. Social media has become a pervasiveness in our daily lives, and this result can observe that social media is most popular among adolescents and young adults. The rapid growth of social media is perceptible to our eyes. This predicament impacts the mental health of an individual, leading to a series of even detrimental impacts that are irreversible. The objective for this project is to investigate the relationship between the activeness of users towards Instagram use, self-esteem, the fear of missing out, as well as social comparison with depression. The second objective is to analyze the result of all variables with box plot to find the mean, median, mode, standard deviation, and outliers. The third objective is to construct a multiple regression model to visualize the findings. The fourth objective is to perform hypothesis testing to study the relationship between independent variables and dependent variables. And lastly, is to discuss the findings and how they relate to a real-world scenario. In this project, the target samples are Malaysians who age between 17 years old to 29 years old, and they use Instagram on a daily basis. The sampling approach that our team decided to use is simple random sampling. We choose the sampling approach because it's able to reduce sampling mistakes possibilities than other sampling approaches. In the survey we distributed to all our respondents, it will be consisting of a total of 54 questions, where they will be further divided into 4 sections. There are also a total of 54 variables, including 1 string variable, 2 nominal variables, 3 racial variables, and 48 ordinal variables.
Salam sejahtera madam, my name is Foong Weng Yau, and now I proceed with the data analysis parts. Data analysis is a process of applying statistical or logical techniques to describe data using illustration. While the pre-processing data means the processing performed on the raw data to prepare it for the next stage of data processing procedure. Now, the following measure using the score of never, rarely, sometimes, somewhat frequently, and very frequently. The frequency for the score is 9, 3, 43, 21, and 13. Next is a passive use measure. This measure gains the frequency of 1, 2, 21, 41, and 35. Next is a measure of Instagram contingent self-worth. It is measured using strongly disagree, disagree, undecided, agree, and strongly agree. The frequency is 2, 6, 48, 37, and 7 respectively. Next is the measure of fear of missing out, FOMO, and the frequency is 10, 24, 44, 20, and 2. Next is the social comparison scale. The frequency is 1, 13, 41, 38, and 7. And this is the last measure, which is the Center for Epidemiologic Studies Depression Scale. The score is measuring using the rarely or none of the time, which means less than 1 day, some or a little of the time, or 1 to 2 days, occasionally or a moderate amount of time, which means 3 to 4 days, and the last is the most or all of the time, 5 to 7 days. The frequency is 1, 44, 49, and 6. Now, I will proceed to the analysis result. The central tendency of our dataset will represent using mode, mean, median, standard deviation, represent the dispersion of the dataset. The first, the active use measure gained a mode of 2.667, a mean of 3.282, median of 3.167, and a standard deviation of 0.783, and there's no outlier for this measure. For the next measure, which is passive use measure, it gained a mode of 4, the mean of 3.070, and a median of 3.9. The standard deviation is 0.845, and against the outliers of 1 and 1.5. Next is the Instagram contingent self-worth. The mode is 3, the mean is 3.120, the median 3, and the data is scaled as the manner of standard deviation 0.768, and the outliers are 1 and 5 respectively. Next is the fear of missing out, FOMO. This measure gained a mode of 3, the mean of 2.563, the median of 2.667, and the standard deviation of 0.892. The outlier is 5. The next is the social comparison skill. It gains a mood of 3, the mean of 2.997, the median of 3, and the standard deviation of 0.803. The final one is the Center for Epidemiologic Studies Depression Skill, which is CESD. The mood is 1.950, the mean is 2.099, the median is 2.100, and the standard deviation is 0.554. That's all from me. Thank you.
Good morning, doctor. My name is Chong Kar Min, laboratory 287173. Now I will present about the multiple regression model of our group. So now we can see this is the scatter plot of active use measure with the CESD, which is the mental health. As we can see here, CESD is expected to increase by 0.053 for each additional score on active use measure test, when the variables passive use measure, Instagram contingent, self-worth, fear of missing out, and social comparison skill are held constant. Next, this is the scatter plot of passive use measure with the CESD, which is the mental health. As we can see here, CESD is expected to decrease by 0.075 for each additional score on passive use measures test, when the variables active use measure, Instagram contingent, self-worth, fear of missing out, and social comparison skill are held constant. Then, this is the scatter plot of Instagram contingent self-worth with the CESD, which is the mental health. As we can see here, CESD is expected to decrease by 0.035 for each additional score on Instagram contingent self-worth test, when the variables active use measure, passive use measure, fears of missing out, and social comparison skill are held constant. Beside that, this is the scatter plot of fear of missing out with the CESD, which is the mental health. As we can see here, CESD is expected to increase by 0.005 for each additional score on fear of missing out test, when the variables active use measure, passive use measure, Instagram contingent, self-worth, and social comparison skill are held constant. Lastly, this is the scatter plot of social comparison skill with the CESD, which is the mental health. And as we can see here, CESD is expected to increase by 0.301 for each additional score on social comparison skill test, when the variables active use measure, passive use measure, Instagram contingent, self-worth, and fear of missing out are held constant. Next, this is the summary output of our multiple regression model. When we see the table, we can know that our dependent variables is mental health, which is the Center for Epidemiology Studies Depression Skill, CESD, and the independent variables are active use measure, passive use measure, Instagram contingent, self-worth, fear of missing out, and social comparison skills. To compute the estimate multiple regression equations, we have to use the coefficients value in the table. Finally, we will count out the equation, which is CESD, the dependence variable, equal 1.402, which is the intercept, plus 0.053. AUM is the active use measure, minus 0.075. PUM is the passive use measure, minus 0.035. ICSW is the Instagram contingent self-worth, plus 0.005. FOMO is the fear of missing out, plus 0.301 is the social comparison skill. Next, to calculate the multiple coefficient of determinations, which is the R-square, we have to use the formula of SSR divided by SST. In here, we will use the value of SS regression divided by SS total and get the result 0.1865, which is same with the regression statistic on the top there, R-square equal to 0.1865. Moreover, to calculate the adjust multiple coefficient of determination, Rn square, we have to use the formula of 1 minus bracket 1 minus R square bracket times n minus 1 divided by n minus p minus 1. We can sub the R square value from the table of regression statistic, which is 0.1865. N is the total number of sample, which is 100, and the p is the total number of independent variable, which is 5. And then get the result, which is 0.1432. That is same with the adjust R square in the regression statistic on the table. Finally, based on the multiple regression model that we have built, R square is 0.1865. Taken as a set, active use measure, passive use measure, Instagram contingent self-worth, fear of missing out, and social comparison skill account for 18.65% of the variance in Center for Epidemiology Studies Depression Scale, CESD. Since the significant F value 0.00142 is lower than the alpha 0.05, therefore this multiple regression model is statistically significant. That's all for me. I will pass it to next presenter.
Good morning, madam. My name is Low Wei Jie with matrix number 289669, and I will be presenting about the hypothesis testing part of our project. So the first one is about the F-test. We set the null hypothesis to be every parameter from beta 1 to beta 5 will be 0, while alternative hypothesis will against it. So for the test statistic, we can get the value by dividing the mean of sum of residual by means of sum of errors, and we can get the value is 4.310 in 3 decimal place. Since the question does not mention about the significance level, we assume it to be 5% and alpha is 0.05. The degree of freedom for numerator is 5 and denominator is 94. The F-test value will be 4.310 by using the Excel. We get the p-value to be 0.00142, which is smaller than the alpha value 0.05, which means we can reject the null hypothesis and conclude that one or more parameters is not equal to 0. Thus, the F-test shows there is a significance relationship exists between the dependent variable Center for Epidemiology Studies and all of the independent variables. T-test is the second hypothesis test to determine whether each of the individual independent variable is significant or not. So we require to do the t-test for each of the independent variable, and it will be start with active use measure. First, we describe the null and alternative hypothesis with similar methods in F-test, but with single independent variable only. So we set the active use measure parameter beta 1 to be 0 in null hypothesis, while in alternative it is not equal to 0. Next, we find the test statistics by subtracting the coefficient of the parameter that get by using the Excel. If the expected parameter is 0, then divide it by the standard error. Since the question does not mention about the significance levels for us to follow, we again assume it to be 5% and alpha value is 0.05. By referring it to the Excel regression model, we can get the t-value is 0.53, which is bigger than 0.05. So we do not reject the null hypothesis, and t-test show there is no significant relationship exists between the dependent variable Center of Epidemiology Study and the independent variable active use measure. Next, we continue with passive use measure. The step is basically the same, so we can directly go to the p-value, which is 0.34. It is also larger than the alpha value of 0.05. Therefore, we reject the null hypothesis and conclude there is no significant relationship exists between the dependent variables Center for Epidemiology Study and the independent variable passive use measure. Followed by the Instagram contingents, the test statistic is negative 0.0451 and p-value is 0.65, which again larger than the alpha value of 0.05. Therefore, we reject null hypothesis and conclude there is no significant relationship exists between the dependent variable Center of Epidemiology Study and the independent variable Instagram contingents. Then, another t-test with the fear of mixing out data variables. The test statistic we get is 0.075 and the p-value is 0.94, which is also larger than a 0.05. So we again reject hash knot and conclude that there is no significant relationship exists between the dependent variable and the independent variable fear of missing out. For the last independent variable social comparison skill, we get the test statistic is 3.9x3 and p-value is 0.00013, which is smaller than 0.05. So for this, we will reject the null hypothesis and conclude there is a significant relationship exists between the independent variable Center for Epidemiology Study and the independent variable social comparison skill. That's all about the hypothesis testing part. Thank you.
So the last part in our video is discussion. As you can see from the hypothesis testing, the F-test means the overall regression model and is significant. Hence, it indicates that when active use measures, passive use measures, Instagram contingent self-worth, fear of missing out, and social comparison scale increases, the depression level will also increase. However, through the t-test, we can see that active use measure, passive use measure, Instagram contingent self-worth, and fear of missing out is not significant. Hence, they do not statistically relate with the regression model. However, for social comparison scale is significant. Hence, when social comparison scale increases, the depression level also increases.
So that's all for our video today. Thank you.